All right, let's talk a little bit about malware. When I say malware, it's a little bit of a not terribly well-defined term. In general, it's any software that's bad, or it does things that are not intended. The owner of the computer doesn't necessarily want them to do. It's not the best definition, but it's kind of a working definition there. So if we go over to crowdstrike.com, we can see they define 11 different types of malware. Ransomware, fileless malware, spyware, whatever, all the way down to mobile malware. I personally don't think that these are the best definitions of malware, because some of these are defined by, kind of how they spread. Some of them are defined by what they do. Some of them is just by what platform it's on. Mobile malware is its own category. That's kind of weird. In any case, this is still a good place to kind of look and see what sorts of malware is out there, if you're not already aware of all of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about bots because, well, actually, no, let's start with ransomware. It's at the top. So ransomware really means that usually a person will lose access to their particular computer, and they'll usually have to pay some sort of fee, some sort of ransom, to regain control of their computer, whether that's through encrypting their files or in some other way. That's ransomware. Fileless malware, I mean, that's malware that's fileless. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Spyware tends to be watching your internet browsing habits and things like that, reporting it somewhere else. This one might be collecting activity data. That one might be collecting, I don't know, passwords about your bank information or something like that also. Adware serves up ads when you don't want them. This is a fairly, I don't know, so just a way for people to make money serving ads. I never got why that was big, but it was. Trojans, the Trojans and Worms, as far as those two are concerned, those are mostly referring to how the virus or how the malware gets on the computer. So it might disguise itself as desirable code, and Emotet is and the example there. This would be, you go to launch Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and it says you have to enable content in order to proceed. And as soon as you hit enable content, that means you've enabled the ability for that code to execute, and it executes it and it affects your system. And yeah, that's kind of that's a typical Trojan right there. Worm spreads itself automatically through. Okay, so their example here is Stuxnet. That's an interesting case if you look into that one. That's kind of beyond what you'll see likely ever, but probably more common example of a worm that you may have actually encountered, or you may encounter at some time in the future, is WannaCry, which actually is kind of a combination. It's a ransomware. It's spread via a worm. So this is why I'm saying these categories aren't terribly great, because you have you can have a worm that is a ransomware, or whatever. As far as a rootkit is concerned, this says gives hackers remote control of victim's device. That's not really, in my opinion, what a rootkit is. That's more of a remote access Trojan, or remote access tool. Rootkit has more to do with infecting the system at a low level, like getting into kernel files, or infecting, like getting loaded before the actual operating system. So the virus actually has more control of your system than your operating system. So what hope does a virus scan have if you have a rootkit? So that's kind of more, from my understanding, more of what's normally meant by rootkits. Keyloggers, you could look at that as kind of a specialized form of spyware, but it's really, keyloggers tend to be focused just on taking keystrokes and sending them somewhere, or just recording them for somebody else to come and learn what your password is, or whatever. Bots typically, once a system is infected, the computer won't necessarily do anything right away, but it'll periodically check back to a command and control server typically. So, somebody will set up a command and control server where all their bots will check back to. And, through having a bunch of bots, we call that a botnet. These command and control servers, they basically, they command and control all the bots. Often they're referred to as CNC servers or C2 servers. That's how you'll typically hear those referred to. Now, the difficult thing about bots is usually once you get that initial infection, that system doesn't really do very much until it sees that there's a command coming, and then it does a bunch of stuff and it sits there and waits. So most of the time it's inactive. It actually becomes fairly difficult to detect unless you can. Usually it's the connection to that command and control server that gets detected. All right, and then mobile malware. Yeah, like I said, I don't really feel like that even deserves to be its own category here, because that's just what type of device it's on. It's on mobile devices, whatever. In any case, I guess there's also, in addition to the stuff on here, some common, starting to become more common types of malware. I think it kind of fits maybe up with the what it does category would be crypto miners. Some malware, some recent, people have started getting infected, getting systems infected, and basically installing crypto miners on that system. So there's kind of this passive source of income that the attacker gains. Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, I think that's all that. Oh, and I guess malware doesn't always have to reside on your hard drive. Some viruses can reside in your boot sector. If you have the old style, before UEFI and secure boot was really a big thing, there would occasionally be boot sector viruses that would load themselves again before your operating system. That would be one way that you would get a rootkit, essentially. Or you can have some malware, or I don't know, mal device that is just a bad cable. Oh, I intended to have this opened up. Let me see if I can. Now I'm not going to be able to find it very quickly. But the OMG cable is an example of one. They make USB cables or lightning cables, whatever, that are pretty much indistinguishable from normal USB cables, but they have a little device in them that will communicate over Wi-Fi or whatever, and they'll act as a keylogger, or they can inject keystrokes, or they can kind of do whatever they want. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch to call that malware, because that's a bad device, but it's still, I don't know, I think it fits here. As far as most malware, so we're going to be focusing less on like spyware and adware and stuff like that. We're going to be focusing in this class or at least I'm going to be talking mostly about malware that tends to be installed by somebody who's trying to gain more access to a system, some sort of adversary, a hacker, for lack of a better term. So oftentimes their goals with malware tend to involve things like that malware needs to be a dropper. When I say a dropper, what I'm talking about is malware that's designed to install other malware. So you'll have a worm that once it infects the system, it will go and download something else and install a remote access Trojan or something like that, remote access toolkit, RAT. Depending on who you ask, it's either Trojan or toolkit. You can have a downloader, which, I mean, you can kind of classify dropper and downloader as the same category. So I'll kind of put those together. You might have something to try to maintain access. So the backdoors, reverse shells that we saw a couple of weeks ago, week or two ago, whatever, we saw previously. Those are all about maintaining access, or maintaining access or strengthening access. or your malware may be trying to achieve a specific objective or goal or action, and that would be ransomware and stuff like that. That would kind of fall under that specific objective. You're trying to encrypt their files, encrypt the target's files, so that they have to pay you a ransom to get them. Or you could just be your malware could just be trying to conceal the fact that you're there. It could go on and delete log files or scour the log files for your tracks or something like that. So there's a wide variety of goals with malware. So the question is, as defenders, how do we detect malware? The first thing we're going to consider is either host-based or network-based scanners. Usually this would be often referred to as host-based detection or network-based detection in NIDS or HIDS, something along those lines. I mean, you could say host-based anti-malware or antivirus, even if you wanted to get a little bit more specialized there. But in any case, let's consider the differences between it being host versus network-based. If it is host-based, meaning it's on an end machine, somebody's actual desktop computer or something like that, this has some advantages in that it does have the best possible access to that device. Oftentimes when you install a virus scan onto a computer, it will get its hooks in very deeply into the operating system, and it will be able to scan, like I said, very deeply. And yeah, you have a lot more ability to scan deeply in those devices. It does, of course, take system resources from the devices they're installed on, which some people don't like. Like if you have multiple antiviruses installed and constantly uses up 100% of the disk usage on your computer, your users will complain. Another problem with host-based detection is that oftentimes most networks are kind of bring your own device, the university included. Students and faculty and whatnot can just connect their own. They can connect their own devices directly to the network, bring in their phone and just connect to the network, and they don't have these scanners. Generally, it becomes difficult to try to require those scanners on their system. So instead, we would be forced to go with something like a network-based scan. The network-based scan has the advantage of, well, it's entirely controlled by your IT or your security department. So that part's good. It can network all your monitor. It can monitor all your network traffic. There we go. That again, that's very good. The downfall here is that it often can't analyze encrypted traffic, HTTPS or anything over SSH or anything that's encrypted. It basically can't see into those packets, and it's forced to just say, okay, I'll pass those along. Hopefully, there's nothing there. Unless, of course, this is set up as a proxy. Some networks will have, you'll basically have to go through an intermediary. If you go to an HTTPS site, you'll have to first connect to your proxy, and then your proxy will send, it'll probably be encrypted. Your network traffic will be encrypted between your end machine and the proxy. It'll get decrypted, it'll get analyzed, that'll get re-encrypted, and then sent on to the whatever website you're going to, and then it'll just go through a reverse process. Now, that process of decrypting and analyzing and then re-encrypting, that's not a trivial process. That does take a decent amount of processing power, and of course that requires that you don't have anyone kind of going around that particular system. So network, there's really not that great of a solution. A full general solution. So oftentimes these antivirus scans end up just being a portion of, it's just one step along the way. As far as how they actually make these detections, your scanners can either be signature based or they can be heuristic, and they can use some sort of heuristic. So if they're signature based, they're generally going to like compare, they're going to look through the actual bytes that are being sent and look for maybe a specific string sequence. Say that sequence of 20 bytes in a row we think only ever happens in this particular malware. We're going to flag it as bad and not deliver it or something along those lines. Or maybe just an alarm will go off, who knows. It might be hash based. So instead of a specific string sequence, it might be, take the entire file, compare the hash of that file to a known list. If you have if that hash matches with something that's bad in your list, then you're going to flag it. Traditional antivirus, that's typically how they would function. They would just have a list of a bunch of hashes, and all the files would be compared against those. I guess I'll go to my next link here. VirusTotal. This particular website actually functions this way. If you were to, you can do a URL to a file, or you can actually upload the file here. If you upload a file there, or give a URL, you can basically look through. They have a list of viruses, or I'll actually do an example with this in just a little bit. But VirusTotal is one website that you can, if you have a file that you suspect might be a virus, you can upload the hash here or search for the hash here, and it'll actually look through a bunch of different well-known antivirus companies and say which ones of them would flag it as a virus. Or you can, this is less sophisticated. You could theoretically have your scanner be file name based or something like that. That's really not that great though. Files are easy to rename. And even a hash is not that great of a scan and not that great of a check, because the whole point of a hash is if you change one bit in this particular file, you have this file that's so many bytes long. If you change one bit in there, your hash should be significantly different. And so that means if you have a polymorphic virus, this is a virus that can change. Oftentimes there'll just be a string within the file that is just randomized periodically or whenever it propagates or whatever. The whole point of that, though, that random string, is to make the hash constantly changing. So that would be an example of a polymorphic virus. So in any case, signature-based virus scans are kind of limited, and that you already have to have seen that virus before, or whatever virus scanner you're using has to have already seen that particular virus, and they have to recognize it as such and have it in their database. So instead, something else that's more recently become, well, not that recently, it's been in use for a while, is heuristic-based scanners. And heuristic-based scanners basically look for suspicious behavior. If this program is accessing a part of memory that it really shouldn't have any access to, that might throw up a flag and say, hey, something suspicious is going on here. If you have a network-based heuristic scanner, it might just look to see if your computer is going to a particular IP address that is flagged as a command and control server, or if it's trying to resolve the name, DNS analysis, trying to resolve a name of a known command and control server. These sorts of behaviors would, you don't really have to know exactly what the hash of the file is. For instance, you can just say, hey, it's doing something suspicious. We're going to flag it as potentially bad. So this is some advantages of a heuristic type scan, is that it can identify threats that have never been seen before. Somebody writes a new program, it's doing something that it shouldn't, and it gets flagged. Disadvantages, there are definitely false positives that you can get. You have a legitimate reason to go to this particular address and you're getting flagged as a virus. Well, that's kind of annoying. That gets in the way of you being able to do your business or whatever. So you have to, if you are using a heuristic scanner, you'd have to make sure it's carefully tuned to not have these false positives, because those false positives will definitely make the C make somebody's boss come over and say, hey, you need to just turn this virus scan off because it's not working. It's getting in the way of business. Ultimately, when we're talking about these security, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that you're not there to say no. You're not there to say that things can't work. You're there to help protect the business and to make sure that that business can actually succeed, or business, or whatever I can't think right now. The organization that you're in, try to make sure that they succeed at their goal. That's ultimately your goal as well. So you don't want these false positives. They could be quite detrimental. Also, well, I guess with all virus scans, they have to have fairly low level access to the system. And actually that right there is somewhat problematic, because there have been cases where the virus scanner itself has become infected. And since it had such low level access, it was able to, you basically have to reformat the computer to try to get rid of it. All right, so those are, I spent quite a bit of time talking about virus scanners. Virus scanners are certainly not the only defense against malware. We also have just generic threat hunting, basically looking around on our systems and trying to find various indicators of compromise, or IOCs. So I have a list of a few indicators of compromise here. I probably should have pulled it over there. I feel like I skipped. Oh, that's in the malware analysis. Okay, so some of this stuff I'm going to see in the malware analysis. Oops. Oh, all right. So indicators of compromise. Yes, sorry, I got distracted. Unauthorized software and files. So if you have a system and you see that there's something installed on the system that the IT didn't authorize, they didn't say that this can be installed, this could potentially be an indicator of compromise, because who installed it? Was it a legitimate user for a legitimate purpose? Okay, that's one thing. If somebody else installed it, then that's another. Suspicious emails. Usually, I mean, we all get suspicious emails coming in, but emails going out that the user says they didn't send, that's definitely a pretty big indicator of compromise. Suspicious registry files and system changes. So, registry file changes and system changes. There we go. If things are changing on the system without you telling it to, again, that's kind of hard to detect sometimes, because oftentimes just updating Windows will change all sorts of system settings or registry files. So yeah, these, a lot of these, you look for them, and if you find them, you take them under consideration, but they're not usually indicators, or they're not usually full-fledged by themselves. Let's see, next is unknown port and protocol usage, or just maybe a mix of these. Oftentimes malware or somebody that's unauthorized will use ports and protocols that are not in your standard range, or maybe they'll send SSH behavior over port 443 or something like that, when normally it would be on port 22. So mixing and matching these ports and protocols. I should probably just show you my face, because I just realized I've been gesturing and you can't really see that anything. So unknown port and protocol usage, or just, so that's, I was referring to more mixing and matching, but unknown ports and protocols, if they're using, if you see a bunch of activity going to what are generally ephemeral ports, that could be kind of suspicious. Excessive bandwidth usage. This one could be, it could be, something downloading all of your data, or it could be, I don't know, maybe somebody using your system to as part of a DDoS attack. Let's see, if you have any rogue hardware on your system, like I said, these the OMG cables, that can be if you just go up and plug it into somebody's computer, it can inject keystrokes into the computer and act as if it's somebody typing. And most computers are not set up to distrust a human, especially if they're already logged in. They've already entered their password. You want full access to that human. But if there is a USB cable that is injecting keystrokes, running programs in the background or something like that, it'll have the full privileges of that particular user. Let's see, service disruption and defacement. If you have a service that keeps going down for some reason and you can't figure it out, it might be a bug, or it might be that your system's compromised. Suspicious and unauthorized account usage as well. If people are logging on to accounts that should be, the person quit and you just haven't gotten around to disabling that account, and you can see suddenly that person is accessing their account again, or something along those lines. All right. So as far as how to keep up to date, if you have a virus scanner, generally those will keep their virus definition list up to date without much effort. But as far as finding specific indicators of compromise, there's actually a few different ways that these IOCs, indicators of compromise, are kind of spread. So, you don't want to have to send out an email with saying, hey, be on the lookout for this particular indicator of compromise. It's, saying that, or it might be indicating that this particular virus is infecting. This doing too much of that stuff would quickly get people to the point where they just aren't going to pay any attention to those emails. So we basically have to figure out some sort of way to automate this, to automate these knowledge of these indicators of compromise. And so we've there've been some developments. Structured threat intelligence, or structured threat information expression. I always want to say intelligence because it's cyber threat intelligence. But in any case, structured threat information expression, that's STIX, uses what's called the TAXI, trusted automated exchange of indicator information. So STIX and TAXI, you'll see those. Those will basically, like I said, this is just a way to spread knowledge about these indicators of compromise. And you can see there's some information here. I have it linked in the in your links. Let's see. There's also the malware attribute enumeration and characterization. I'm not going to spend too much time on each of these. This is usually pronounced Mike. I know it looks like make, but whatever, they say Mike. The whole point of this one, it's supposed to be complementary to STIX and TAXI. And the idea here is that if we can, a malware analysis, trying to actually figure out what this particular malware is doing, is a time-consuming and expensive process, because it just takes a long time, and you have to have somebody that's fairly specialized to be able to do it. So if we can reduce any duplication of malware analysis efforts, then that's good. So trying to identify figure out ways to describe the malware so we can match them up with one another. Say that, oh, this particular malware had these characteristics, and basically to figure out a way to describe the malware. Then you can more easily see, oh, this malware is actually of this class, and this is actually an emotet, so we actually don't need to spend much more time on that. We know how it works. So that's a big part of the reason why this STIX and Mike, those sorts of things work, or why they exist. There's also Mandiant has a proprietary information indicators of compromise. They call it Open IOC, which I think is kind of funny that they use a proprietary form, but they call it Open IOC. Let's see. There's also, I think theirs was the, I don't know. Theirs might not have been proprietary. I don't remember exactly. There's also the Malware Information Sharing Platform. I don't even have a link to that one. MISP, again, sharing information about malware. And then let's see, Yara. This is actually more a way for your, if you have a scanner for the scanners. I mean, I guess that's more what stick syntax Yara also. But Yara, here's an example of a specific Yara rule. It defines a couple of strings. There's a condition. If string A or B or C is present, then this rule will go off and it'll say, hey, this is this particular strain of malware. Like I said, this would be an example of a signature-based scan because it's looking for a specific string. So, oops, I don't mean to send a bug report. All right, so I think that is enough for now. We've talked a bit about different types of malware, how we scan for them, and various indicators of compromise. I'll see you next time.